control, and escape. Quote, "The doctor of the future will no longer treat the human frame with drugs, but rather will cure and prevent disease with nutrition." Thomas Edison. Among the myriad of esoteric topics discussed, none may be as important to your own personal well-being as the diet you cultivate. The larger questions of nutrition and food choices are surrounded with disinformation that draws us away from the correct answers we need to use in order to make healthy nutritional choices. Why, for example, are diseases such as cancer so rampant in our society? What is the correlation between our blood and diet that so few people know about, which could be the key to optimum health? Why is it that almost all food commercials on television are exclusively promoting fast food restaurants or processed meals? Why does it seem there is a conspiracy to keep us unhealthy rather than at an optimum state of vitality and strength? A famous quote by the ancient Greek physician Hippocrates states, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." This timeless adage still holds incredible truth today, as the most effective way to protect the body against disease is to feed it the nutrients it needs to build strong immunity and a healthy digestive tract, where the bulk of immunity resides. Artificial flavors, colors, preservatives, emulsifiers, and sweeteners have saturated the food supply for more than 4 decades now. We are on the precipice of discovering what our toxic food industry has done to our bodies and our environment. It is important to ask if you are healing yourself long term, or are you just covering up the symptoms, similar to Hippocrates' nutrition doctor Ann Wigmore maintains, quote, "The food you eat can be either the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison," end quote. And now we are confronted with genetically modified organisms, GMO crops, which were originally introduced with no human safety tests. The crops were given a carte blanche approval because the entire Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, process is corrupt and controlled by large corporations. People may be developing cancer and other ailments as a result of eating GMO food, and no one would know. We may be unknowingly developing serious digestive disorders and neurological problems because the testing process has been hijacked. Did you ever wonder how people who exist on a diet of mainly processed foods can be both overweight and malnourished at the same time? Despite overly abundant calories, people who live off of boxed macaroni and cheese, frozen dinners, ramen noodles, and other packaged foods are not getting the essential nutrients that those who eat a whole foods diet are getting. Deadly GMO ingredients aside, the sheer amount of chemicals in processed food can lead to disease, obesity, malnutrition, and a premature death. Knowing what we put in our bodies has never been more important. As a popular bumper sticker says, if the label says sugar-free or low-fat, think chemical shitstorm. Since most Americans do not output the same amount of matter that they input into their bodies, it explains why so many people diet but can never lose weight. To understand this dilemma, we need to learn about our food choices and our bodies in a different context. For instance, the body creates fat cells to store acid and other toxins. Almonds have 79% fat of the good kind, whereas pork has only 58%. The difference between the two is that pork, as with all meats, is literally dead. When anything is in a state of death or decay, it holds an acidifying effect on its environment as it breaks down. Pork in particular is a 3 on the pH scale, whereas almonds are an 8. We gain weight only when the body is toxic and cannot take out the trash. When our bodies are not able to output the same amount of toxins we input, they become acidic. If we are not excreting the same amount of toxins that we eat, breathe in the air, or apply to our skin, we are creating cancerous conditions inside our bodies. Sadly, there is little information on this subject, hence its entry as a control mechanism in the realm of esoteric study. The alarming reality is that people are fed by a food industry that pays no attention to health and are treated by a health industry that pays no attention to food. Billions of people eat fast food daily. The high levels of calories, animal fat, and sodium in most fast food menu items will eventually lead to serious health problems. A study published in the Journal of the American Heart Association found that eating significant amounts of fast food can contribute to arteriosclerosis, another term for clogged arteries, and which can increase a person's risk of health conditions such as heart attack and stroke. Fast food can contribute to an increased risk of arthritis, sleep apnea, certain kinds of cancer, diabetes, and liver disease, according to the study. Fast food is called junk food for a good reason. People pay a high price in negative dietary elements when they eat junk food, including, quote, empty calories or bad fat and far more sodium than the body needs, with relatively small amounts of nutritional value. To understand why, consider that one popular fast food hamburger contains about 540 calories and 29 grams of fat. It contains 10 grams of saturated fat and 1.5 grams of trans fat. The sodium content is 1,040 grams. However, the hamburger does contain about 25 grams of protein, with 6% of your recommended intake for vitamin A, 2% for vitamin C, and 25% each of calcium and iron. The trans fat, sugar, and calorie content from one McGriddle sandwich is close to the maximum calorie content a smaller size adult should have all day. But of course, there's never just one. There are sides with that sandwich, and let's not forget the other two daily meals. All those empty calories are high in bad fats and lacking in essential food nutrients. This is why, despite the feeling of being fed a big meal, the body is actually being malnourished. Quite literally, you are what you eat and drink. The majority of fast food French fries are made from GMO potatoes, and some are deep fried in animal fat, which is the worst way to cook food. Artificial chemicals, dyes, processed sugar, and cancer-causing ingredients such as carcinogenic aspartame, routinely found in soft drinks, are making regular consumers ill and unfit. Does this sound like a treat to you? Soda pop is something you have once in a while for a treat. Consider finding something else to stimulate your senses. Aspartame, GMOs, and untreated industrial waste can be included in the slow kill family of eugenics, along with chemtrails, fluoride, and vaccines, as we've seen in previous chapters. Top 10 food additives to avoid. Chemical additives find their way into our foods to help ease processing, preservation, packaging, and storage. But how do we know what food additives are in that box of macaroni and cheese, and how could it have such a long shelf life? It bears repeating to think chemical shitstorm when you see the words low fat and fat free posted on a snack label. Sugar, caffeine, alcohol, junk food, or processed food are the culprits that increase general anxiety in people. So try to avoid these too. A typical American household spends about 90% of their food budget on processed foods, and in doing so becomes exposed to a plethora of artificial food additives, many of which can cause dire consequences to a person's health. Some food additives are worse than others, although this list is controversial among those who commented on the Food Matters TV website. Here's a list of the top 10 food additives to avoid. Number 1, artificial sweeteners. Aspartame, aka NutraSweet, is an excitotoxin, a substance which overexcites cells to the point of damage or death. It is a serious health risk. It is typically found in diet or sugar-free sodas, such as Diet Coke, Coke Zero, Jell-O and other gelatins, desserts, sugar-free gum, drink mixes, baking goods, tabletop sweeteners, cereal, breath mints, pudding, Kool-Aid, iced tea, chewable vitamins, and toothpaste. There are many artificial sweeteners on the market, and some are more toxic than others. Clearly, aspartame is the worst, with only 4 calories per gram and 200 times sweeter than sugar. Aspartame is sold under the trademarks NutraSweet and Equal. Results indicate that aspartame is a multi-potential carcinogen, even consumed daily at 20 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. That is a lower quantity than the maximum recommended by the FDA. It's one reason you should never purchase major brands of chewing gum. Aspartame is such a toxic poison, it will be featured extensively below. Number 2, high fructose corn syrup. This high fructose corn syrup, HFCS, is a highly refined artificial sweetener that has become the number 1 source of calories in America. It is found in almost all processed foods. HFCS packs on the pounds faster than any other ingredient, increases your LDL, that is the bad cholesterol levels, and contributes to the development of diabetes and tissue damage, among other harmful effects. A few years ago, the Corn Refiners Association petitioned the Food and Drug Administration to allow the term, quote, corn sugar as an alternative label declaration for high fructose corn syrup. The reason? Too many people were finding out how lethal HFCS is for the human body. High fructose corn syrup is found in most processed foods, breads, candy, flavored yogurts, salad dressing, canned vegetables, and cereals. HFCS causes insulin resistance, diabetes, hypertension, increased weight gain, not to mention that it is manufactured from genetically modified corn. Number 3, the food additive monosodium glutamate. That's MSG or E621. MSG is a slow poison that hides behind dozens of names, such as natural flavoring, yeast extract, autolyzed yeast extract, disodium glutamate, disodium incineate, caseate, textured protein, hydrolyzed pea protein, and many others. Currently, labeling standards do not require MSG to be listed in the ingredients list of thousands of foods. MSG is an amino acid used as a flavor enhancer in soups, salad dressings, chips, frozen entries, and many restaurant foods. MSG is also an excitotoxin. Studies show that regular consumption of MSG may result in adverse side effects, which include depression, disorientation, eye damage, fatigue, headaches, and obesity. MSG affects the neurological pathways of the brain and disengages the, quote, I'm full function, which explains the effects of weight gain. MSG is mostly found in Chinese food, called the Chinese restaurant syndrome. Many snacks, chips, cookies, seasonings, most Campbell's soup products, frozen dinners, and lunch meats. It is not a nutrient, vitamin, or mineral and has no health benefits. The part of MSG that negatively affects the human body is the glutamate, not the sodium. The bound glutamic acid in certain foods, corn, molasses, wheat, is broken down or made free by various processes: hydrolyzed, autolyzed, modified, or fermented with strong chemicals, bacteria, or enzymes, and refined to a white crystal that resembles sugar. 4. Trans fat. Trans fat is used to enhance and extend the shelf life of food products and is among the most dangerous substances that you can consume. Found in deep fried fast foods and certain processed foods made with margarine or partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, trans fats are formed by a process called hydrogenation. Numerous studies show that trans fat increases LDL cholesterol levels while decreasing HDL, the good cholesterol. It increases the risk of heart attacks, heart diseases, and strokes, and contributes to increased inflammation, diabetes, and other health problems. But oils and fat are now forbidden on the Danish market if they contain trans fatty acids exceeding 2%, a move that effectively bans partially hydrogenated oils. Trans fat is found in margarine, chips, crackers, baked goods, and fast foods. Multiple studies on Pacific Island populations who get 30 to 60% of their total calorie intake from fully saturated coconut oil have all shown nearly non-existent rates of cardiovascular disease. The fact is, all saturated fats are not created equal. The operative word here is created because some saturated fats occur naturally, while other fats are artificially manipulated into a saturated state through the man-made process called hydrogenation. Hydrogenation manipulates vegetable and seed oils by adding hydrogen atoms while heating the oil, producing a rancid, thickened substance that really only benefits processed food shelf life and corporate profits. Just about all health experts now agree that hydrogenation does nothing good for your health. These manipulated saturated fats are also called trans fats, and you should avoid them like the plague. Number 5, common food dyes. Food colorings still on the market are linked with cancer. Blue 1 and 2 found in beverages, candy, baked goods, and pet food have been linked to cancer in mice. Red 3, used to dye cherries, fruit cocktail, candy, and baked goods, has been shown to cause thyroid tumor in rats. Green 3, added to candy and beverages, has been linked to bladder cancer. The widely used yellow 6, added to beverages, sausages, gelatin, baked goods, and candy, has been linked to tumors of the adrenal gland and kidney. Studies show that artificial coloring found in soda, fruit juices, and salad dressings may contribute to behavioral problems in children and lead to a significant reduction in IQ. Animal studies have linked other food colorings to cancer. Watch out for these: blue number 1 and blue number 2, also called E133, which are banned in Norway, Finland, and France. Each may cause chromosomal damage. They are found in candy, cereal, soft drinks, sports drinks, and pet foods. Red dye number 3, also labeled as E124, and the more current dye red number 40 were both banned in 1990 from many foods and cosmetics after 8 years of debate. These dyes continue to be on the market until supplies ran out. These dyes have been proven to cause thyroid cancer and chromosomal damage in laboratory animals and may also interfere with brain nerve transmission. They are still found in fruit cocktail, maraschino cherries, cherry pie mix, ice cream, candy, bakery products, and more. Yellow number 6, that is E110, and yellow tartrazine, E102, are banned in Norway and Sweden. They have been found to increase the number of kidney and adrenal gland tumors in laboratory animals and also may cause chromosomal damage. They are found in American cheese, macaroni and cheese, candy, carbonated beverages, lemonade, and more. 6, sodium sulfite, that's E221, and sodium chloride. Sodium sulfate is a preservative used in winemaking and other processed foods. According to the FDA, approximately 1 in 100 people is sensitive to sulfites in food. The majority of these individuals are asthmatic, suggesting a link between asthma and sulfites. Individuals who are sulfite sensitive may experience headaches, breathing problems, and rashes. In severe cases, sulfites can actually cause death by closing down the airway altogether, leading to cardiac arrest. Sodium sulfite is found in wine and dried fruit. A dash of sodium chloride, more commonly known as salt, is the culprit that the mainstream media and medical community claim we should stay away from. And they're right, but only because it's not real salt. That is, common table salt, sodium chloride, has almost nothing in common with traditional rock or sea salt. If a label lists salt or sodium chloride as an ingredient, that's the bad stuff, and you need to avoid these foods wherever possible. 7, sodium nitrate. Sodium nitrate is used as a preservative, coloring, and flavoring in bacon, ham, hot dogs, luncheon meats, corned beef, smoked fish, and other processed meats. This ingredient, which sounds harmless, is actually highly carcinogenic once it enters the human digestive tract system. There it forms a variety of nitrosamine compounds that enter the bloodstream and wreak havoc with a number of internal organs, liver and pancreas in particular. Sodium nitrate is widely regarded as a toxic ingredient. The USDA actually tried to ban this additive in the 1970s, but was vetoed by few food manufacturers who complained they had no alternative for preserving packaged meat products. But why does the industry still use it? Simple. This chemical just happens to turn meat bright red. It's actually a color fixer, and it makes old, dead meats appear fresh and vibrant. It's found in hot dogs, bacon, ham, lunch meat, cured meats, corned beef, smoked fish, and any other type of processed meat. Number 8, BHA and BHT. That's butylate hydroxyl and butylated hydroxylene. BHA and BHT E320 are used to preserve common household foods. Any processed food that has a long shelf life is often filled with BHA. The preservatives are found in cereal, chewing gum, potato chips, and vegetable oils. They keep food from changing color, changing flavor, or becoming rancid. They are also oxidants, which form potentially cancer-causing reactive compounds in your body and can affect the neurological system of the brain and alter behavior. They are found in potato chips, gum, cereal, frozen sausages, enriched rice, lard, shortening, candy, and jello. Propyl gelate is another preservative often used in conjunction with BHA and BHT. It is sometimes found in meat products, chicken soup base, and chewing gum. Animals studies have suggested that it could be linked to cancer. Number 9, sulfur dioxide, E220. Sulfur additives are toxic. In the United States, the FDA has prohibited their use on raw fruit and vegetables. Adverse reactions include bronchial problems, particularly in those prone to asthma, hypertension, low blood pressure, flushing, tingling sensations, or anaphylactic shock. Sulfur additives also destroy vitamins B1 and E and are not recommended for consumption by children. The International Labor Organization of the UN says to avoid E220 if you suffer from conjunctivitis, bronchitis, emphysema, bronchial asthma, or cardiovascular disease. It is also found in beer, soft drinks, dried fruit, juices, cordials, wine, vinegar, and potato products. Number 10, potassium bromate and potassium sorbate. Potassium bromate is an additive used to increase volume in some white flour and is found mostly in breads and rolls. Potassium bromate is known to cause cancer in animals. Even small amounts in bread can create problems for humans. As one of the most prolific preservatives in the food industry, it is difficult to find an ice cream without potassium sorbate. However, it is not only recommended that people avoid this chemical, it's a necessity to eliminate it from our foods as a dangerous substance. The food industry and its scientists will parrot endless myths that potassium sorbate is not a health threat because of its safety record and non-toxic profile. This could not be further from the truth. Food and chemical toxicology reports have labeled potassium sorbate as a carcinogen, showing positive mutation results in the cell of mammals. Other studies have shown broad, systematic, and toxic effects on non-reproductive organs in animals. No long-term studies have ever been initiated on either animals or humans, so there is simply not enough evidence to theorize what could happen after years of ingesting this preservative. Toxic dump. A dishonorable mention to the above list is fluoride, which is not on the list because it is added to water and not to food. Fluoridated water is of dubious value for dental health and is yet another low-level environmental poison that should be banned. For those who believe the myth that is good for our teeth, why then was fluoride deliberately added to Nazi prison camps and Soviet gulag drinking water? Why is fluoride a main ingredient in Prozac and sarin nerve gas? Why is it widely added to water and toothpaste supplies in the USA? Why doesn't anybody care? Because we're all on fluoride. Fluoride is the primary ingredient in many rat and cockroach poisons. the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology has classified fluoride as an unapproved dental medicament due to its high toxicity. Humans dump tons of toxins, trash, and assorted poisons onto the earth every day. Then we eat it. Animals eat it. Then we eat them. Isn't this going to kill us? Of course it will, but not right away. First, we're going to get dumber. Most of us grew up ingesting fluoride, which collects around the pineal gland in the brain. Fluoride is a poison. It can kill you if ingested directly. Those who stay quiet and die prematurely only have themselves to blame when they could have saved themselves and others by making enough commotion. It is said people put faith in God. The gods are questionable, but the politics are crystal clear. Political goals and our best interests do not coincide. We have some intelligent, well-meaning politicians, just a few. We have a few smart people who keep telling us what is taking place in the world and what will happen if we don't act. They are, for the most part, ignored. But the earth is a big nutrient factory. Everything we need to have a healthy brain comes from the earth. But what if we poison the earth? What effects will it have on our brain? Everything we put down, drop, dump, empty out, or swallow ends up in our brain. There is nothing else that can happen. It's as simple as we are what we eat. If we pollute the earth, we pollute what grows, and we then pollute our brains by ingesting the same toxins. Since the early 1990s, jet aircraft have been observed spraying aluminum, barium, and other mysterious elements and compounds into the atmosphere in what has become known as the chemtrail phenomenon. Available evidence is indirect via measurable rain, water, and snowpack, but the levels are so high, in some cases 1,000 times higher than normal, that some artificial source is clearly indicated. More evidence for the chemtrail agenda are various patents, thousands of photos and videos worldwide, leaked videos of the planes, and individual testimonies that all strongly suggest jet planes are spraying a cocktail of metallic elements and Morgellon polymers into the atmosphere. One charitable description of geoengineering as a misguided attempt to suppress global warming, also called solar radiation management. Other more nefarious explanations include a possible tie-in to the HARP array of mass mind control, weather control, Monsanto's aluminum-resistant seeds, or a slow-kill anti-human eugenics program. For the first time ever, the atmosphere has conductive metallic particles in the air. Codex Alimentarius. The Codex Alimentarius was created in 1962 as a trade commission by the United Nations to control the international distribution of food. Its initial intentions may have been altruistic, but it has since been taken over by corporate interests, most notably the pharmaceutical, pesticide, biotechnology, and chemical industries. Codex Alimentarius is a collection of internationally recognized standards, codes of practice, guidelines, and other recommendations relating to foods, food production, and food safety. Its texts are developed and maintained by the Codex Alimentarius Commission, a body that was established over 50 years ago by the Food and Agricultural Organization, the FAO of the United Nations, and the World Health Organization, WHO, that runs the program. Their officially stated purpose is to develop international food standards, to protect consumer health and to facilitate fair trading practices in foods. But looking a little deeper, the Codex Alimentarius Commission is actually the UN and the WHO working in conjunction with the multinational pharmaceutical cartel and international banks. More and more people are becoming concerned about the shady, secretive, and dangerous laws and guidelines that is Codex Alimentarius. In reality, it is the thinly veiled propaganda arm of the international pharmaceutical industry that does everything it can to promote industry objectives while limiting individual options to maintain health. Of course, public knowledge would diminish members' profits, so the real motives are kept top secret. In December 1974, the U.S. National Security Council, under command of Henry Kissinger, prepared a classified study called National Security Study Memorandum 200. That's NSSM 200. That falsely claimed that the worldwide population growth poses a major threat to U.S. national security interests. Codex Alimentarius is a control agenda because those who control the food supply control the people. Codex Alimentarius is particularly dangerous because one of the major strategies behind the effort is to limit access to nutritional products and accurate information. Nutrients, minerals, and herbs could be categorized as toxins or as hard drugs along with heroin. Most of the information available regarding Codex Alimentarius refers to its role in the USA, but it is not a USA-specific body. Far from it. Codex has wiggled its way into just about every national or international body concerned with public health. Posing as a benefactor, it then uses its significant financial and political clout to do its bidding. While investigating the WHO and UN role in the weapons attack that became known as the swine flu, a H1N1 pandemic of 2009, criminal intelligence agents from Canada and the US stumbled upon a covert and sinister plan to kill off as many as 3 billion people by food malnutrition. The organization responsible for the starvation and murder of nearly half the world's population is none other than the Codex Alimentarius Commission of the United Nations. The criminal intelligence agents discovered that Codex Alimentarius is in full implementation mode and is changing the status of the life essential nutrients in our food, such as vitamins, minerals, and enzymes, and labeling them as poisons. After the nutrients were reclassified, the Commission has been given the legal authority by the United Nations to eradicate key nutrients in our foods. They have already begun the eradication process by pasteurizing, that exposes food to high heat and irradiating, which exposes food to radiation. Milk was the first to be targeted for eradication because milk is one of the most important life-sustaining foods on earth. It's full of vitamins, minerals, and enzymes, all essential ingredients for keeping people healthy and alive. Next were eggs and processed foods. Because all of the vitamins, minerals, and enzymes have been destroyed by pasteurization and irradiation, our bodies cannot stop or fight off diseases and illnesses caused by consuming these dead and rotting organisms. It's as if we're being starved to death from eating. This is yet another of the slow kill depopulation programs being implemented on the general population. Say no to GMOs. Genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, are made by the biotechnology process of genetic engineering. This process is accomplished by splicing genes from one species, such as bacteria, viruses, animals, or humans, and forcing them into the DNA of a food crop or animal to introduce a new trait. These newly modified organisms have never been tested for safety or potential health risks. Surprisingly, there is no national mandate to label GMO foods. Vermont had a state law requiring GMO labeling, but was overridden by a national gag order, and the labeling was discontinued. Widely available GMO foods currently on food market shelves include corn, soy, yellow and crookneck squash, canola, sugar beets, alfalfa, and cottonseed, and their byproducts, plus some zucchini and Hawaiian papayas. Without labeling requirements for GMO ingredients in the USA and Canada, it can be very difficult to know if you're eating GMOs. Because they are so new, these foods have not been adequately tested for safety, and feeding studies with animals suggest potentially critical health problems for humans eating these GMO products. Nevertheless, some GMOs have toxins that have been linked with birth defects, cancer, and hormone disruption. GM corn and soy have a poisonous pesticide called Bt toxin, which kills insects by breaking open their stomach in each cell. Recent evidence suggests that Bt toxin can also break down human cell walls, and Bt corn is currently registered as a pesticide with the BPA. Think leaky gut. Results from studies with GMO-fed animals also suggest that potential for critical fertility problems among humans. Russian biologist Alexei V. Surov, along with other researchers, fed Campbell hamsters, which have fast reproduction rates, with Monsanto GM soy for 2 years. Most of the third-generation hamsters in the study were infertile, had stunted growth, and suffered up mortality rate. International scientific studies and reports from farmers show that animals fed GMOs exhibit fertility problems, including damaged sperm cells, abortions, and premature deaths, as well as altering DNA functioning. Currently, Bt toxin has been found in 93% of the blood of pregnant women tested and 80% of their unborn fetuses. Children, especially, are vulnerable to the dangers of GMOs. Infants and young children are more sensitive to chemicals, toxins, and food allergens. In short, their immune systems and blood-brain barriers are not fully developed, and they metabolize food faster. Yet, GMOs are found in non-organic baby formula, cereals, dairy products with RBGH or RBST, both genetically engineered bovine growth hormones, and many other foods. Even Kaiser Permanente, the largest managed healthcare organization in the United States, has advised its members against GMOs in food. In its fall 2012 Northwest Region newsletter, Kaiser suggested its membership limit exposure to genetically modified organisms. According to the newsletter, quote, GMOs have been added to our food supply since 1994, but most people don't know it because the U.S. does not require labeling of GMOs, end quote. Kaiser gave tips on how its members can avoid GMOs, including buying organic, looking for the non-GMO project verified seal, and encouraged members to download the Shop No GMO app. Finally, they suggested that consumers should look for food products that have the certified organic logo on the package. Sounding more like a radical organic health proponent, the huge Kaiser Corporation continued, quote, "Despite what the biotech industry might say, there is little research on the long-term effects of GMOs on human health," end quote. Just as Kaiser has real concern for its patients, it is difficult to ignore the numerous independent studies that now show GMOs cause organ damage and an inability to reproduce in rodents. Eating bioengineered and genetically modified organisms? The health risk of consuming GMOs, also called genetically engineered foods, are becoming more widespread in the USA food supply at a surprisingly alarming rate, and without any long-term knowledge of what the consequences might be. It is now clear that Americans are sick more often than Europeans and more often than people from any other industrialized nations. Emerging scientific evidence suggests that a significant factor may be the genetic engineering of the American food supply, with more than 80% of processed foods in the USA now containing GMOs. It is important to note that at least 64 countries outside of North America require GMO labeling. In May 2013, the USDA announced J.R. Simplot's petition to produce what would then be the only genetically engineered potato on the market. Simplot, one of the USA's leading suppliers of French fries, has branded them innate potatoes. Essentially, the Idaho company figured out how to use existing potato DNA to design a spud that's less prone to dark spots. When cooked, it produced less acrylamide, a neurotoxin found in many foods. But studies on animals have indicated it may also cause cancer because the DNA has been tampered with. Despite claims by government regulators in the food industry that GE foods are safe, scientific studies continue to show the opposite. GE foods have been linked with allergies, reproductive problems, and infertility, birth defects, bizarre mutations, cancer, and now an unidentified mystery organism causing an epidemic of livestock deaths called sudden death syndrome. In humans, GE foods can trigger immune attacks because they appear to your body as foreign invaders. The immune response can lead to chronic inflammation, which in turn raises a person's risk for additional health problems. Through genetic engineering, animals can now be given entirely new characteristics by transferring the genes of one species into another. Animals can be made to grow faster and larger, and with the world's population skyrocketing, the need to feed necessitates a bigger and more sustainable food supply. Even more potential uses of genetically modified animals include creating animal organs that are easily transplanted into humans, but at what risk? The two main types of GMO foods are distressing: herbicide-tolerant crops and pesticide-producing crops. At the very least, both are imprecise processes that are riddled with unexpected consequences, such as hundreds to thousands of genetic mutations with determined effects on human health. At worst, GE foods may be part of a secret anti-human eugenics program to cull the ever-growing population. From GMOs to cloning to eugenics. In the early 1990s, Monsanto began gene splicing corn, cotton, soy, and canola with DNA from a foreign source to achieve one of two traits. They wanted to produce an internally generating pesticide along with an internal resistance to Monsanto's weed killer Roundup. Despite decades of promises that genetically engineered crops would feed the world with more nutrients and retain drought resistance, the majority of Monsanto's profits came from seeds that are engineered to tolerate Monsanto's Roundup. An ever-rising dual income stream as weeds continue to evolve resistance to Roundup. Monsanto has patented and released aluminum-resistant seeds, seemingly to counter the aluminum particles being sprayed in chemtrails as reported worldwide. 1996 marked the first official cloning of mammals, a sheep named Dolly. A heated debate continues to this day regarding the morality of cloning. The moral question then becomes, is cloning playing God, or is it scientific progress? In the early 1970s, when the first test tube baby, Louise Brown, was created, 78% of the U.S. population were against the idea of creating life outside the womb. The process consisted of an egg that was fertilized outside the mother's womb and then implanted. Although it caused an uproar, public protests, and controversy at the time, today the test tube process is commonplace, and since then over 50,000 babies have been created through assisted reproduction in the USA alone. One threat of cloning is eugenics, called transhumanism by some, and it is the science of improving hereditary qualities by selective breeding, genetic engineering, or the culling of certain ethnic groups. Some consider depopulation to not merely be an urban myth of global fantasy, but instead consider it a chilling reality. Way back in the early 1900s, 30 U.S. states adopted eugenics laws that required citizens to be sterilized if they had a hereditary condition such as insanity, criminal tendencies, retardation, or epilepsy, and similar laws were enacted in other countries. Adolf Hitler wanted to create a master race and have himself cloned. Furthermore, Hitler believed that he could determine what was superior and what was inferior. But is it so far-fetched to consider a nation creating an army of cloned super soldier humans bred and brainwashed to kill? There are various agendas and worldwide proposals that are either implemented or on the table. From Henry Kissinger's NSSM 200 to Ted Turner's admission on video, it is clear the globalists want us dead. Abolish the criminal FDA. For several decades, running global industry has been changing the genetic design of crops and seeds without informing the public. As to the genetic modification of particular foods, labels are not even required in the United States. Large chemical companies own most of the seed companies, and their intention is to control all sources of the world's food supply. These organizations can now patent and own seeds. Organic farmers can no longer prevent their naturally grown crops from being infected by cross-pollinated varieties, which may contain harmful chemical insecticides that are inserted at a genetic level. We as humans are the unwitting guinea pigs of this experimentation. Some estimates are that 70% of the food in our grocery stores now include elements of genetically modified foods. The FDA's own scientists have warned about the unique health hazards of genetically engineered foods, yet the FDA ignores the advice of its own scientists and chooses to support the biotech industries in their quest to patent life, all the while poisoning our food system. GMOs do not feed the world. They only feed Monsanto's bottom line. Have you seen any walnuts in your medicine cabinet lately? According to the Food and Drug Administration, that is precisely where you should store them. This is because Diamond Foods made truthful claims about the health benefits of consuming walnuts. As a result, the FDA sent Diamond Foods a letter declaring, quote, "Your walnut products are drugs, and new drugs at that. Therefore, quote, they may not legally be marketed in the United States without an approved new drug application," end quote. The agency even threatened Diamond with seizure if it failed to comply. With such irrational and draconian policies, the FDA more correctly stands for the Fraud and Deception Administration, or perhaps Fraud and Death Administration. As of late, the FDA has issued waves of warning letters to companies making foods such as pomegranate juice, green tea, and walnuts, which are natural foods that protect against ailments such as arteriosclerosis. The FDA is blatantly demanding that these companies stop informing the public about the scientifically validated health benefits these foods provide. The FDA obviously does not want the public to discover that they can reduce their risk of age-related disease by consuming healthy foods. They prefer consumers only learn about mass-marketed pharmaceutical drugs or garbage foods that shorten human lifespan by increasing degenerative disease risk. Case in point, the FDA allows potato chips to be advertised as heart healthy. Pesticide poison. The World Health Organization has warned that chronic, non-communicable diseases are rapidly becoming a worldwide epidemic, but they stop short in placing the blame correctly. In the big picture, escalating rates of neurocognitive, metabolic, autoimmune, and cardiovascular diseases cannot be ascribed only to genetics, lifestyle, and nutrition. Early life exposure plus ongoing bioaccumulation to toxins are also causing chronic diseases in virtually every human demographic. Similar to GMOs, chemicals in genetically engineered foods, pesticides were unleashed onto the natural world decades ago, and the consequences are only now beginning to be understood. A recent study has determined a direct correlation between fetal exposure to pesticides and genetically modified foods. One major study conducted in Quebec, Canada, produced several alarming conclusions. It must first be pointed out that the pesticide genetically modified food connection, will go by the acronym PAGMF, is a development whereas certain foods are engineered to tolerate herbicides, such as glyphosate, GLYP, and glufosinate, GLFU, or insecticides such as the bacterial toxin Bacillus thuringiensis, BT. The aim of the Canadian study was to evaluate the correlation between maternal and fetal exposure and determine exposure levels of GLYP and its metabolic N-methyl phosphoric acid, AMBA, GLUF and its metabolic 3-metamorphosaporanic acid, 3-MPPA, and Cryl-1AB protein, a BT toxin, around the eastern township of Quebec, Canada. Researchers analyzed the blood of 30 pregnant women and 39 non-pregnant women. The serum of GLYP and GLUF were detected in non-pregnant women and not detected in pregnant women. Serum 3-MPPA and CRY-AB1 toxin were detected in pregnant women, their fetuses, and non-pregnant women. This is the first study to reveal the presence of circulating PAGMF in women with and without pregnancy, paving the way for a new field in reproductive toxicology, including nutrition and utero-placental toxicities. Multiple perspectives can be summarized as contributing factors to the general poor health of the nation. They are the biological effects of the different classes of toxicants, as the Quebec study determined. Pesticides and other mechanisms of toxicity are also confirmed to be contributors to major diseases. To combat rising rates of disease, healthcare practitioners have wide-ranging obligations when addressing environmental factors in public policy, public health, and clinical practice. Public health initiatives include risk recognition and chemical assessment. Health officials can also recommend exposure reduction, remediation, monitoring, and avoidance. The complex web of diseases and environmental contributors ironically suggests some straightforward clinical approaches to addressing multiple toxicants. Widely applicable strategies include emphasis on nutrition and supplements that counter the toxic effects of GMOs. Applications also include exercise and sweating, and possibly medication to enhance excretion. Addressing environmental health and contributing factors to chronic disease has broad implications for society, with large potential benefits towards improved health and productivity. Food safety should really mean organic. The word organic refers to the way growers nurture and control their crops. Organic regulations ban or greatly restrict the use of food additives and pesticides. Organic farmers use natural fertilizers such as compost rather than chemical products. They rotate crops to preserve soil nutrients and use gardening procedures which preserve water and reduce pollution. They give farm animals space outdoors and feed them additive-free and growth hormone-free products. It is not surprising that the chemical industrial complex is not a supporter of organic farming. According to Dr. Shiv Chopra, a health whistleblower in Canada, the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2010, that's S510, may be the most dangerous bill in the history of the USA. He continues, quote, S510 would preclude the public's right to grow, own, trade, transport, share, feed, and eat each and every food that nature makes. It would become the most offensive authority against the cultivation, trade, and consumption of food and agricultural products of one's choice. It will be unconstitutional and contrary to natural law, or if you like, the will of God. In other words, the bill attempted to outlaw a citizen's right to grow, consume, and sell pesticide-free, chemical-free foods. Such draconian measures are similar to what India faced with the imposition of the salt tax during British rule. Only S510 extends control over all food in the USA, violating the fundamental human right to grow their own food or share seeds. S510 would give Monsanto unlimited power over all USA seed, food supplements, food, and farming. It would be illegal to grow, share, trade, or sell homegrown food. It will allow government to imprison violators. Unfortunately, despite massive protests, the U.S. Senate passed S510 food safety bill at the end of November 2010, and it was signed into law by President Barack Obama in early January 2011. In classical Orwellian doublespeak, Monsanto says it has no interest in the new law and would not benefit from it, but Monsanto's Michael Taylor, who gave us RBGH and unregulated genetically modified organisms, appears to have designed the law himself. He even appointed himself as the new food czar to the FDA to administer the agency it would create without judicial review. In March 2013, this provision, which critics named the Monsanto Protection Act, was covertly inserted into the Agricultural Appropriations Bill that President Obama quickly signed into law. The provision protects genetically modified food interests from litigation. Fortunately, this provision was wisely taken out in September 2013. Monsanto is well aware that, quote, he who controls the food controls the population. Let's not forget Monsanto is primarily a chemical manufacturer. In the end, we need to distinguish between chemically induced food and natural organic food. Instead of healthy fruits, vegetables, grains, and grass-fed animal products, U.S. factory farms and food processors produce a glut of genetically engineered junk foods that generate heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and cancer, all backed by food subsidies, while organic farmers receive no such assistance. According to the Organic Consumer Association, quote, there is a direct correlation between our genetically engineered food supply and the $2 trillion the U.S. spends annually on medical care, namely an epidemic of diet-related chronic diseases, end quote. How is it and why is there no public outcry that Monsanto is allowed to cause such detrimental impact to our environment and our health? Monsanto's history reflects a consistent pattern of toxic chemicals, lawsuits, and manipulated science. Is this the kind of company we want controlling our world's food supply? Monsanto is not the only perpetrator. Other companies in the Big Six include Pioneer Hybrid International, a subsidiary of DuPont, Syngenta AG, Dow AgroSciences, a subsidiary of Dow Chemical, BASF, which is primarily a chemical company that is rapidly expanding their biochemicology division, and Bayer Crop Science. The parent company, Bayer, bought Monsanto in 2016 to become one of the world's biggest agricultural giants. Now there is the Big Five. The monster called Monsanto. The chemical multinational corporation Monsanto, whose dark history features scandals involving PCBs, Agent Orange, bovine growth hormone, NutraSweet, and genetically modified seed and herbicides, reaches back to the 1970s and 80s when the St. Louis-based company began to roll out consumer products. Monsanto was also besieged by charges that its decade of Vietnam War defoliation with Agent Orange dioxins, branded by a Yale environmentalist, quote, the largest chemical warfare operation in human history, has contaminated as many as 10 million Vietnamese and American people. This led to a $180 million settlement covering the claims of 52,000 troops in 1984. While Monsanto can trot out its own findings and influence the FDA to support its seed safety claims, there are independent studies linking its corn to organ damage, obesity, diabetes, and allergies. The monster called Monsanto. It is worth noting that the company's profits plunged in 2010 when evidence mounted that GM seeds, 90% of which originate with Monsanto, were not boosting yields as promised. Monsanto is highly suspect, especially when regarding its dubious history in the products it produces. The wall of shame is long and extensive. Monsanto told us that DDT was safe. Monsanto told us that Agent Orange was safe. Now, Monsanto and other chemical companies are in charge of telling us that their genetically modified foods are safe. You might wonder why our food is being made and modified by the world's largest pesticide manufacturer. Genetically modified foods appear to have serious long-range consequences, many of which will not be determined for decades. Already, GMOs are linked to serious health problems for people, animals, and the soil. Ultimately, they will be genetically modifying the very people they feed. Essentially, Monsanto is a chemical production company. Even as their aspartame and phthalate business are now owned by the drug company Pfizer, the company that also produces Listerine. What are some of the most potentially dangerous GMO crops? The genetically modified Monsanto crop known as BT corn has been altered in order to produce its own toxin, a pesticide called Bacillus thuringiensis, which was artificially introduced into the corn to kill off rootworms before they have a chance to ruin the crop. This hybrid Franken crop now accounts for over 65% of all the U.S. corn production. It has been shown to cause a resistance to rootworm beetles, yet also render the crop useless. Monsanto's GMO corn crops ravage American farmlands, but for some reason, federal agencies ignore the danger. In a study released by the International Journal of Biological Sciences, analyzing the effects of genetically modified foods on mammalian health, researchers found that Monsanto's GM corn is linked to organ damage in rats. According to the study, which was summarized by Radi Anda at Food Freedom, quote, 3 varieties of Monsanto's GM corn, that's Mon 863, insecticide producing Mon 810, and Roundup herbicide absorbing NK 603, were approved for consumption by USA, European, and several other national food safety authorities, end quote. Monsanto gathered its own crude statistical data after conducting a 90-day study, even though chronic problems can rarely be found after 90 days. It concluded, therefore, that the corn was safe for consumption. The stamp of approval may have been premature. However, as the study concluded, quote, effects were mostly concentrated in kidney and liver function, the 2 major diet detoxification organs, but in detail differed with each GM type. In addition, some effects on heart, adrenal, spleen, and blood cells were also frequently noted. As there normally exists sex differences in liver and kidney metabolism, the highly statistically significant disturbances in the function of these organs seen between male and female rats cannot be dismissed as biologically insignificant, as has been proposed by others. We therefore conclude that our data strongly suggests that these GM maize varieties induce a state of hepatorenal toxicity. These substances have never before been an integral part of the human or animal diet, and therefore their health consequences for those who consume them, especially over long periods of time, are currently unknown." End quote. A 2-year study published in September 2012 by French researchers led by Professor Gilles Eric Seralini revealed that rats fed Monsanto's Roundup Ready corn developed significantly more tumors than a control group not fed GE corn. Roundup Ready crops have been specifically engineered for resistance to Monsanto's top-selling herbicide, glyphosate, marketed under the trade name Roundup. In the scientific literature, Roundup Ready corn is also known as NK603. The rats fed a GMO diet also developed tumors that appeared earlier and grew more aggressively. Then these rats died sooner than rats in the control group. The rats fed on Monsanto's genetically modified corn, or exposed to its top-selling weed killer, suffered tumors and multiple organ damage. Gilles Eric Seralini of the University of Caen said rats fed on a diet containing NK603, a seed variety made tolerant to dousings of Monsanto's Roundup weed killer, or given water with Roundup at levels permitted in the United States, died earlier than those on a standard diet. The animals on the GM diet suffered mammary tumors as well as severe liver and kidney damage. The study was published in the peer-reviewed journal Food and Chemical Toxicology and presented at a news conference in London. Quote, "NK603 must be immediately withdrawn from the market, and all GMOs must be subject to long-term testing," the briefing concludes. The researchers said 50% of the males and 70% of females died prematurely, compared with only 30% and 20% in the control group. Seralini, in a scientific paper published in 2009, was part of a team that had voiced previous safety concerns based on a more concise rat study. This new study takes things a step further by tracking the animals throughout their 2-year lifespan. Seralini believes his latest lifetime rat test gives a more realistic and authoritative view of risks than the 90-day feeding trials that form the basis of GM crop approvals. 3 months is only the equivalent of early adulthood in rats. Now that genetically modified corn is shown to cause cancer, why is it still on the market? The Geneva-based Covales has a system for tracking the reputations of the world's largest companies. It ranked Monsanto at the bottom of 581 multinationals in its 2010 Ethics Index. GMOs are deeply unpopular and outlawed in Europe and many other countries, yet they dominate key crops in the United States ever since 1996, when Monsanto introduced a soybean that was genetically altered to tolerate Monsanto's Roundup weed killer. How is it that Monsanto is allowed to manipulate our food after such an ominous and dark product history? Aspartame poison. Aspartame is an artificial sweetener currently used in more than 6,000 consumer products worldwide, including most diet soft drink beverage products. It is more popularly known as NutraSweet, Equal, Creatine, and Canderel. It is found in foods labeled diet or sugar-free, but in reality, they are terribly toxic for the body. Aspartame is believed to be a carcinogenic and it accounts for more reports of adverse reactions than all other foods and food additives combined. Aspartame is not your friend. In fact, it was once listed as a potential biochemical weapon by the Pentagon. The current patent holder for aspartame is the Monsanto Company, which was partner of IG Farben, the infamous chemical company within Nazi Germany. Soft drinks may contain up to 190 milligrams of aspartame per 8.3 fluid ounce serving. The largest soft drink manufacturers note that, quote, when aspartame is digested, the body breaks it down into aspartic acid, palalanine, and methanol, end quote. And it is methanol that is one of the root problems with aspartame. When methanol is consumed via aspartame, methanol is free to break down to toxic formaldehyde, and humans, unlike other animals, are incapable of converting the toxic formaldehyde into harmless formic acid. Initially discovered in 1965 as a drug to treat peptic ulcers, this king of all artificial sweeteners was allowed into the market in 1981 when the U.S. Commissioner of Food and Drugs, Arthur Hull Hayes, overruled FDA panel suggestions along with consumer concerns. Aspartame, chemical number E951, is a neurotoxin that interacts with natural organisms, as well as synthetic medications, and producing a wide range of proven disorders and syndromes. So, who installed this commissioner who would rule against scientists and the public? None other than Donald Rumsfeld, who at the time was CEO of G.D. Searle & Company, the maker of aspartame. Rumsfeld was on Reagan's transition team, and the day after Reagan took office, he appointed the new FDA commissioner in order to call in his markers within one of the most egregious cases of profit over safety ever recorded. Former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, with his political clout, therefore, helped to get aspartame pushed through the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. According to a press release issued on this RICO lawsuit, double-blind studies showed conclusive evidence that aspartame increased severe health problems and even death to the exposed study group. This isn't the first lawsuit alleging that aspartame is hazardous to the health of humans. The National Justice League filed 3 other lawsuits in late April of 2004 in 3 separate California courts. The defendants in those lawsuits were 12, and all 12 produce or use aspartame as a sugar substitute in their products. Aspartame is now nearly ubiquitous, moving beyond sugarless products and into general foods, beverages, pharmaceuticals, and even products for children. In a stroke of marketing genius, it has recently been renamed the more pleasant-sounding amino sweet. Aspartame and its offshoot neotame are considered to be the most dangerous food additives on the market today. Its main compounds are aspartic acid, phenylalanine, and methanol. These combine to kill neurons in the brain, poison the body, and are linked to an enormous number of ill health effects. In 1970, scientists fed milk with aspartame to 7 monkeys to study the effects. The final result was startling. At only 218 days, 5 monkeys suffered from seizures and 1 died. It is terrifying to think that this insidious product is added to over 5,000 food products designated as dietary low-fat, sugar-free, or non-fatty foods. It is also an ingredient in a number of medications, both prescription and over-the-counter. Aspartame is a neurotoxin and carcinogen, known to erode intelligence and affect short-term memory. The components of this toxic sweetener may lead to a wide variety of ailments, including brain tumors, diseases like lymphoma, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, Graves' disease, fibromyalgia, and chronic fatigue. Emotional disorders like depression and anxiety attacks, dizziness, headaches, nausea, mental confusion, migraine, seizures, and even kidney failure. Acylmate K, a relatively new artificial sweetener found in baking goods, gum, and gelatin, has not been thoroughly tested and has been linked to kidney tumors. In any other scenario, this substance would be considered poison, and an FDA recommendation for non-ingestion would be posted on the bottle. But because this poisonous substance has been approved by Food and Drug Associations, it is legal, just like it is with fluoridated water. Aspartame is a literal poison that has creeped into many processed foods. This deadly artificial sweetener is produced by feeding fossil fuel oil to E. coli that are themselves genetically modified to defecate aspartame as feces. Not so sweet when you realize what you're actually eating. Finally, in 2012, aspartame was associated with increased risk of blood cancers in a long-term human study conducted by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. The study concluded that as little as one diet soda per day can increase the risk for leukemia in adult men and women and toward multiple myeloma and non-Hodgkin lymphoma in men. This is according to new results from the longest ever running study on aspartame as a carcinogen in humans. Importantly, this is the most comprehensive long-term study ever completed on this topic, so it holds more weight than other past studies, which appeared to show no risk. And, disturbingly, it may also open the door for similar findings on other cancers in future studies. These results were based on multivariable relative risk models, all in comparison to participants who drank no diet soda. It is unknown why only men drinking higher amounts of diet soda showed an increased risk for multiple myeloma and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. By far, diet soda is the largest dietary source of aspartame used in the USA. Every year, Americans consume about 5,250 tons of aspartame, of which about 86% or 4,500 tons is found in diet sodas. Is this another depopulating, soft-kill, toxic poison being peddled to the sheeple? You bet your sweet aspartame. Brave new world of meat. The mass production of lab-grown meat products has now been created via the muscle stem cells taken from cows. Scientists in charge of these studies have hopes that by being able to grow beef in a lab, we can create a quick and renewable abundance of food, and that could help diminish world hunger and the inhumane treatment of animals in slaughterhouses. But is the world ready for meat and other food products produced artificially in laboratories? What are the upsides and downsides? It is time to ask. One stated advantage is the reduced need for grazing lands. Of all the Earth's land masses free of ice and permafrost, 1/3 is devoted to cattle ranching. Cows are one of the leading causes for greenhouse gases in the form of methane, and it contributes up to 1/5 of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. On one hand, eliminated pasture land for cattle would free vast tracts of land to be restored to their natural habitat. But on the other hand, what are the consequences of moving to a lab-created diet? Is the future of fine dining being cultured in a petri dish? Certainly an ethical treatment of domesticated animals would be eliminating the need to send them to the slaughterhouse. In a world where rapid technological growth is exceedingly apparent, it is important that we find new ways to deal with the scientific realities of the 21st century. A frequently raised question regarding the idea of lab-grown meat is, why grow meat in labs in the first place? What about the existing alternatives like soy, tofu, etc.? Nutritionally, there are both good and bad sides to a multitude of existing alternative consumables. Soy consumption, for example, has displayed trends towards warding off the onset of prostate cancer in males, as well as a reduced risk of breast cancer in females. Unfortunately, most soy is now GMO, and there are other issues. Leading food expert Beatrice Trum-Hunter made this observation, quote, "The raw soybean contains numerous anti-nutrients. Although processing can reduce them, it does not eliminate them. The raw soybean is an anti-coagulant, an agent that prevents blood clotting. The anti-coagulant property is not reversed by vitamin K, which is a highly effective blood clotting agent. Green leafy vegetables and liver are excellent sources of vitamin K. Many Americans are low in vitamin K. Soy's anti-coagulant property is attributed to its anti-trypsin activity. Trypsin is a special enzyme needed to digest protein. In addition, trypsin allows vitamin B12 to be assimilated. Thus, by blocking trypsin activity, the soybean as an anti-trypsin agent increases the requirements for vitamins B12 and actually creates vitamin B12 deficiency. Leading food expert Beatrice Trum-Hunter made this observation, quote, "The raw soybean contains numerous anti-nutrients. Although processing can reduce them, it does not eliminate them. The raw soybean is an anti-coagulant, an agent that prevents blood clotting. The anti-coagulant property is not reversed by vitamin K, which is a highly effective blood clotting agent. Green leafy vegetables and liver are an excellent source of vitamin K. Many Americans are low in vitamin K. Soy's anti-coagulant property is attributed to its anti-trypsin activity. Trypsin is a special enzyme needed to digest protein. In addition, trypsin allows vitamin B12 to be assimilated. Thus, by blocking trypsin activity, the soybean as an anti-trypsin agent increases the requirements for vitamin B12 and actually creates vitamin B12 deficiency." End quote. Don't panic, go organic. It is said that every ailment has a natural cure that can be found somewhere in the world, but you won't be hearing about that from the large agribusinesses and big pharma. Thus, manufactured natural cures have been set up to fail by design in order to reinforce big pharma's monopoly and their allopathic system of medicine. Real natural cures are suppressed, and they never make it into mainstream public awareness. Similarly, natural medicines are suppressed because their use and marketing is beyond the legal control and monopoly of drug and chemical patents. Of course, natural substances can never be patented, and this is why every natural and non-toxic therapy is automatically called quackery by the corporate-owned FDA, the chemical industry, and the medical establishment. Only unnatural, non-organic, chemical-based products may be patented. Non-toxic medicines are a threat to the business of medicine. To qualify for a Rockefeller Foundation medical research grant, applicants must agree to abandon, quote, traditional and natural medicines, end quote, in lieu of a new generations of petrochemical drugs, and must comply with the removal of entire libraries of recording past procedures. It became dangerous for traditional, naturopathic doctors to cross these professionals who are aligned with the chemical industry. All dissenters, those who embrace time-tested, holistic, and naturopathic methodologies, continue to be demonized as quacks throughout formal medical training. This defamation has been employed despite some of these quacks having received the Nobel Prize in Medicine. It is a carrot and stick strategy. Compliant schools are given the carrot in the form of Rockefeller money. Non-compliant naturopathic doctors get the stick in the form of FDA police action, even to the point of dying in prison for having cured patients with unapproved medicine. Harassment of grocers selling organic, non-chemical foods still occurs, including those selling certain cancer-killing vitamins or even raw milk. It's not just doctors with cures anymore. Curing by definition is illegal, since no natural cures are ever approved, but cures for many have come to be associated with freedom from the control and manipulation of the chemical industry. It is very important to understand exactly what we are putting into our bodies. Phytonutrients and phytochemicals are plant foods that contain thousands of natural chemicals. Phyto refers to the Greek word for plant. These chemicals help protect plants from germs, fungi, bugs, and other threats. Phytonutrients aren't essential for keeping you alive. This is unlike the vitamins and minerals that plant foods contain. But when you eat or drink these phytonutrients, they are known to help prevent disease and keep your body working properly. There are more than 25,000 phytonutrients found in plant foods. Superfoods are nutrient dense and super healthy when you exercise portion control. It is important to note that you can have too much of a good thing. Most plant-based foods contain phytonutrients, with the most complete being whole grain, nuts, beans, and tea. A macro diet, by definition, draws from a wide spectrum of healthy foods based on beneficial plant-based food choices. The nutritional industrial complex regularly tempts us with unhealthy food, but just remember, we still have a choice. While it might be more expensive to buy all organic or difficult to seek out non-GMO foods, you should treat your body as a temple. Avoid high fructose corn syrup products, minimize sugar intake, and don't buy any food you see advertised on television. Upwards of 2/3 of ad expenditures go to heavily processed foods. Choose foods with 5 ingredients or less and shop the perimeter of the supermarket. If your grandmother didn't eat it, then you should not eat it either. If your grandma would not recognize it, then don't eat it. Quite simply, eat whole foods, not too much, and mostly vegetables. With these simple pointers, you will begin to see positive results in overall health, and you'll begin to escape from food control.